All right, in this video, I wanted to give you all an overview of my workflow and sort of my creative thought process in the layering assignment. So I've got a set of source images here. This isn't exactly everything that I use, but this is a good survey of the types of images that I used. So again, we're focused on layering here and making the most interaction between layers in an image that we can. And I've got a range of different media types here. So I've got some watercolors, some photographic prints together. I've got some of these sort of studio shots of similar things. So kind of these like geometric patterns and objects. I've got some nature photos. I've got lock screens from phones. I've got some images of my own body. So range of different media types, range of different imagery types, and I want to bring those all together into a composition where those disparate things are really interacting with one another. So I'll want to jump into Photoshop now, and rather than showing you step by step how I did this, I want to kind of give you a few stages that I went through and some of the explanations and thought processes that were going through my head as I built out this composition. So this is kind of a early-ish starting point where I was starting to composite together a lot of these images using very similar selection and layering techniques to what we covered in the micro lectures for this week. So you can see, for example, here I've got like this butterfly selected out on its own layer, some of these flowers as well. So those are a little bit more organically shaped compared to as compared to some of these sort of more rectangular shaped. And so as I was compositing these together, I was trying to focus on continuity. Let me zoom in here a little bit, and you can see some examples of that here, right? So I've got continuity between this watercolor and this photographic image. Same thing here, a little bit here too. So trying to have some continuous lines going between these really different images. What I ended up finding was that the sort of horizontal and vertical rectangular bounds of a lot of these images was A, getting really boring, B, it was really sort of preventing different parts of the image from interacting and overlapping as much as they needed to. So that's kind of a piece of advice that I would give you is to, it's not that you can't have rectangular boundaries like this, but since we're so used to seeing images with rectangular boundaries, that's sort of an automatic visual cue that those things are separate. So the more you can do to break down those rectangular boundaries, the easier it's going to be to get your images to seem like they're interacting with each other. So this is about the point where I stopped and said, you know what, something else needs to happen here. I need to do something to sort of get this into a more cohesive composition and to, break down some of those rectangular boundaries that were happening. By the way, the themes I was thinking about basically was order, and a little bit more specifically than that, kind of the balance between like a natural order, an organic order, an order that can sort of happen on its own without human intervention versus maybe a more like mathematical or analytical order that's more tied to geometry and abstract human thinking. So kind of thinking about how those two types of order balance with each other. So I was at this point, a little bit of a stuck point. So I decided to bring in a pattern, and this is kind of a sketch of my pattern. And I wanted these sort of cells within my composition to give, again, a little bit of a balance of natural order and maybe geometric order or analytical order. So I sketched this out and used that as a framework to fill in the rest of my composition. And that's something that can be really helpful too, is where, getting yourself to a place where you don't have to think about the entire composition all as one thing. You can sort of separate it out into smaller parts, and that can sometimes make it easier to deal with and sometimes actually make it more interesting. So I used that as a template and eventually came up with this. So I sort of gave myself these little zones to set up places where my layers could interact with each other. And I think it worked a lot better. And I think I was able to both alleviate some of the separations that were happening with those rectangular boundaries, but then also use them to my advantage. So you can see like this line here, I've got this really nice continuity, sort of cutting almost all the way across the image, but then it's getting interrupted. So sort of playing with that rectangular boundary. And that's happening several other places here. So there's, sort of rectangles within rectangles. They're balanced out and they're contrasting with some of these more natural edges. So I ended up having a lot of fun sort of playing with, sort of messing with tweaking those geometric boundaries that can often make images feel really separate. So I feel like I got to a pretty good place here in terms of making these layers interact with each other, and in terms of, focusing in on the theme of an order, that is both a mix of natural and geometric. So I'm pretty happy with how this came out. I hope you have some fun with this assignment. Please make sure that you read through the layering project description so that you know all of the prompts and the restrictions. And most of all, just have fun.